Beloved friends, for countless generations, humanity has searched the heavens, the temples, the scriptures, and the far corners of the world, seeking the kingdom of God, believing it to be some distant realm attainable only through death, discipline, or divine favor. We have been taught, almost instinctively, to look beyond ourselves for the presence that gives us life. And yet the Master, in his infinite clarity, spoke a truth so simple, so direct, that the human mind has struggled to grasp it. The kingdom of heaven is within you. This single truth, when understood, changes the entire nature of your spiritual journey. It removes the strain, the effort, the self-condemnation that so often accompany the religious quest. It reveals that the very thing you have been searching for, peace, supply, healing, harmony, is not waiting in the clouds, nor hidden in some sacred geography, but already seated in the depths of your own consciousness. And if this is so, then the spiritual life is not a journey outward, but a turning inward, not a striving toward God, but an awakening to the God who has never left you for a single instant. The teaching we explore today is not speculative theology. It is not the product of imagination or philosophical argument. It is the fruit of spiritual experience, tested, lived, and demonstrated. This is the discovery that transformed my own life. That heaven is not a place, but a state of awareness. That God is not approached through effort, but realized through recognition. And that the presence you have long believed to be separate from you is the very essence of your being. So let us begin this hour together, not with belief, not with hope, but with receptivity. Let us become still enough to sense, even faintly, that within this very moment, within the very consciousness listening to these words, the kingdom is already present. You need not travel toward it. You need not achieve it. You need only recognize that what you have been seeking is the ground of your own life, the truth of your own identity. With this recognition, we step together into a new dimension of understanding, a dimension where God is not a distant deity, but the living presence within you, where heaven is not a promise deferred, but a reality awaiting your awareness now. Let us look honestly, quietly, at one of the greatest misunderstandings that has shaped the spiritual life of humanity. For centuries, the kingdom of heaven has been presented as a place remote, reserved, and reachable only by a select few who fulfill certain conditions or survive certain trials. Heaven has been described as a realm to be entered after death, earned through behavior, or bestowed upon those fortunate enough to be chosen. And because of this deeply embedded belief, most seekers have naturally concluded that God must also be somewhere else, far removed from the immediacy of daily life. This misunderstanding lies at the root of nearly all spiritual frustration. It is the reason so many find themselves praying to a God who seems silent, waiting for a blessing that never comes, or striving for a holiness that constantly slips out of reach. When the kingdom is believed to be external and distant, the seeker's entire consciousness becomes one of separation. God there, the individual here, heaven above, humanity below, holiness beyond, struggle within. And you see, once separation is assumed, everything built upon it is burdened with effort. You try to reach God. You try to become worthy. You try to rise above the human condition by climbing a ladder that does not exist. All the while, the presence you seek is closer than your breath, nearer than your heartbeat, already intertwined with your very being. The tragedy of this misunderstanding is not that people have sought God sincerely. The tragedy is that they have sought him where he is not. And so the mind, conditioned by centuries of belief, projects heaven outward, imagines it upward, assigns it to celestial geography or future time. But the Master did not say, the kingdom will be within you someday. He did not say, the kingdom is waiting for you after life. He said, with divine simplicity, the kingdom of God is within you. To miss this is to miss the foundation of spiritual life. To misunderstand this is to search endlessly without finding, and to cling to the belief that heaven is elsewhere is to overlook the living presence that is your very life. Let us be very clear. As long as the kingdom is imagined as external, you remain a seeker. But the moment you recognize that the kingdom is a state of consciousness already present, you cease seeking and begin awakening. The entire journey changes. The struggle dissolves. The burden lifts. You discover that you have not been moving toward God. God has been expressing himself as your very consciousness from the beginning. This misunderstanding, then, is not merely theological. It affects your inner experience every day. It determines how you pray, how you interpret challenges, how you view yourself, and how you relate to the world. And until this error is corrected at the level of consciousness, no amount of religious effort can bring the peace or illumination you desire. Therefore, we must gently release the notion of a heaven out there and prepare to explore the profound truth that heaven is a dimension of awareness available now, not later, here, not elsewhere, within, not beyond. Now, having set aside the belief in a distant heaven, we can begin to behold the true nature of the kingdom, a nature so simple, so immediate, that the human mind almost overlooks it. The kingdom of heaven is not a realm you travel to. It is not an environment waiting to be entered. It is not granted after the body falls away. The kingdom of heaven is a state of consciousness, a spiritual awareness already present at the center of your being. This is the profound revelation that transforms the spiritual path from one of pursuit into one of awakening. And it is here that the entire teaching takes on a new dimension. For when we recognize that the kingdom is consciousness, not geography, we also recognize that we are not separated from it. You cannot be separated from your own consciousness. You cannot be disconnected from what you already are. When the Master declared the kingdom within, he was pointing to an inner awareness where truth is known, where harmony is felt, where guidance becomes natural, and where peace is no longer sought but recognized as the very essence of being. This awareness does not need to be created. It does not need to be attained through moral effort or religious performance. It requires only that the veil of mental noise be lifted, revealing what has been present all along. You see, the human mind insists that heaven must be complicated, hidden, or earned. But spiritual consciousness is always simple, immediate, and universally available. It is not reached through willpower. It is realized through receptivity. It is not the result of outer achievement. It is revealed in inner stillness. It is not something you grow into. It is something you uncover. Let us make this very practical. When you experience a moment of deep peace, when a solution rises quietly from within, when intuition guides you without strain, when love flows without effort, that is the kingdom touching your awareness. That is heaven breaking through the layers of fear, thought, and belief. And when you feel disconnected, confused, or anxious, it is not that the kingdom has vanished. It is only that consciousness has become absorbed in appearances, in conditions, in the surface level of experience. The kingdom remains exactly where it has always been within you, unchanged, undiminished, waiting for recognition. Joel Goldsmith often said that spiritual awakening is not the adding of something new to your life. It is the removal of that which obscures what is already eternally present. You are not moving toward God. You are awakening to the fact that God, the infinite consciousness, is the essence of your own being. Heaven, then, is not a later reward. It is the dimension of life perceived, when fear is quiet, when thought relaxes, when the heart becomes still enough to feel the presence that has always been there, and as your awareness shifts, your experience of life shifts, not because circumstances change first, but because you begin to see through the lens of truth rather than the lens of illusion. To embrace the kingdom as consciousness is to accept that you are already in the presence of God. Not someday, not eventually, now. Once we begin to recognize the kingdom of heaven as a state of consciousness, another profound truth reveals itself. This kingdom operates according to spiritual laws, not the laws of material belief. And until we understand this distinction, we remain confused by life's contradictions, believing that God sometimes heals and sometimes withholds, sometimes blesses and sometimes abandons. All of these contradictions arise when we try to interpret spiritual life through the lens of material logic. In the kingdom of heaven, this inner spiritual dimension, there is no law of lack, there is no law of sickness, there is no law of conflict. These belong only to the realm of material perception, the world judged by appearances. But when consciousness rises above appearances, when awareness shifts from fear to recognition, you discover a universe governed not by chance or limitation, but by harmony, order, and infinite supply. Let us take this slowly, for it is the foundation of the entire path. In material consciousness, you live as though outer conditions determine your well-being. Your income seems to come from your job. Your health appears to come from the body. Your safety seems dependent upon circumstances. And so naturally, fear arises. Anxiety becomes constant. Competition becomes necessary. Life becomes a struggle of self-preservation. But when awareness opens to the kingdom within, a different order becomes visible. You discover that your supply does not come from the world but flows from the infinite source within. You find that your peace does not depend upon circumstances but upon consciousness. You realize that healing is not the repair of matter, but the revelation of spiritual wholeness that has never been touched by material conditions. This is why Joel Goldsmith always emphasized, you do not take God into the problem, you rise in consciousness above the problem. When you seek to manipulate outer conditions, you remain bound to material law. But when you enter the silence and recognize the presence, you rise to a higher dimension where harmony is already established. Consider healing. In the realm of material belief, healing is the process of correcting the body. But in the kingdom, healing is the recognition that wholeness exists at the level of spirit, and that physical conditions are but shadows of consciousness. When the inner realization dawns, the outer form often follows, not because God intervened from afar, but because consciousness expressed its own truth. Or take supply. In the realm of appearance, supply is limited, scarce, uncertain. But in the kingdom, supply is a spiritual function, an infinite outflow of ideas, opportunities, and guidance. When consciousness abides in the recognition of divine sufficiency, the outer world rearranges itself in accordance with that recognition. This is not magic. It is spiritual law. And relationships, how deeply people suffer in this area. They try to fix others, change others, persuade others. But in the kingdom, harmony is not achieved through effort, but through seeing the spiritual nature of the one before you. When you behold the divine presence where personality once stood, relationships transform, sometimes outwardly, always inwardly. So understand this. The inner kingdom has its own laws, and these laws are always in operation. You do not make them work. You do not activate them. You merely align with them by raising consciousness above fear, judgment, and material dependence. When you dwell in material consciousness, you experience the conflict of that level. When you dwell in spiritual consciousness, you experience the harmony of that level. Nothing external changes first. Consciousness changes, and the outer world reflects that shift. This is the essence of living in the kingdom. It is the quiet, steady awareness that spirit alone is cause, and that the visible world is effect. When you remain anchored in inner recognition, life begins to unfold with a grace and intelligence far beyond anything the human mind could design. Now, having understood that the kingdom of heaven is a state of consciousness governed by spiritual laws, we come to the inevitable question, how does one enter this kingdom? How does one live from this inner realm rather than from the world of appearances? And the answer, though simple, requires sincerity and practice. The doorway into the kingdom is not effort, not struggle, not petition, but recognition and stillness. You cannot think your way into the kingdom. You cannot will your way into it. You cannot storm the gates through intensity or discipline. The kingdom is entered by becoming still enough, quiet enough, receptive enough to sense the presence that is always already there. It is not attained through activity, it is revealed when mental activity subsides. Joel Goldsmith called this the practice of the presence, and it forms the heart of all spiritual unfolding. It is not a technique, nor is it a formula. It is a turning inward to acknowledge that within your own consciousness, the divine is living its life as you. It is the recognition, simple, silent, profound. God is here. God is now. God is the essence of my being. Let us take this gently. Begin each morning not by rushing to your tasks, not by reaching for your phone, but by allowing a moment of stillness to open within you. Sit quietly. You need not close your eyes unless it helps. You need not speak. Simply rest in the awareness. The kingdom of heaven is within me. The presence is my life. Do not try to feel anything. Do not wait for emotion. Do not seek an experience. Merely acknowledge truth. And then, as thoughts arise, and do not battle them, do not argue with them, allow them to pass like clouds drifting across a vast sky. You are not trying to suppress thought. You are shifting awareness from thought to presence. Even 30 seconds of this quiet recognition begins to soften the mind's habitual grip on material consciousness. Throughout the day, return to this recognition frequently. When you face a difficulty, pause, not to ask God to fix the problem, but to remember that the kingdom is within you, and that spiritual law governs all true activity. When you make a decision, pause, not to analyze endlessly, but to listen for the quiet intuition that arises from the inner presence. When fear or anxiety appears, pause not to fight them, but to rest in the truth that beneath every appearance, divine harmony is intact. This is how one enters the kingdom, not through extraordinary spiritual feats, but through simple, continual recognition. In the evening, again return to stillness. Review your day, not with judgment, but with awareness. Notice where you lived from fear and where you lived from peace. Notice moments where the presence seemed near and where it felt distant. Both are part of the journey. Both teach. Both gently bring you back to the truth that the kingdom is not something you visit, it is something you remember. The practice of stillness does not instantly bring illumination. It does not deliver dramatic visions or immediate transformation. Rather, It gently dissolves the mental noise that obscures the presence. Like dust settling from clear water, your consciousness becomes transparent enough for spiritual awareness to shine through. Eventually, you discover that stillness is not a practice you perform. It becomes the natural resting place of your being. You begin the day in the kingdom. You move through the world with the kingdom. You return to rest in the kingdom. And in time, you realize that you never truly left it. You had only forgotten. This is the way into the inner kingdom. Quiet recognition of what already is, and stillness that allows it to reveal itself. Up to this point, we have spoken of the kingdom as an inner state, a spiritual realm of consciousness that is present regardless of outer conditions. But unless this understanding becomes practical, unless it touches the details of your daily life, it remains an abstraction. And so, we must look at how the kingdom expresses itself when consciousness shifts, how the invisible becomes visible, how inner awareness becomes outer experience. We must be very clear. The purpose of spiritual realization is not to improve the world of appearances. It is not to manipulate conditions or achieve certain results. The purpose is awakening itself. Yet as consciousness awakens, life naturally reflects that awakening, just as the calmness of a lake reflects the sky more clearly than turbulent waters. Outer demonstration is the effect, spiritual recognition is the cause. Let us take a few areas where this becomes unmistakably evident. Health. In the material outlook, health is seen as a condition of the body. When something goes wrong physically, we react with fear, with concern, with desperate seeking. But in the kingdom, health is a quality of spirit, perfect, whole, unbroken. When consciousness returns to the recognition of inner wholeness, fear dissolves, and with it the frantic attempt to correct matter from the level of matter. You turn inward, quietly acknowledging, the life of God is the life of my being. Wholeness is the truth of me now, and as that awareness settles into consciousness, the body often responds not because you have fought disease, but because you have recognized a truth that exists deeper than physical appearance. I do not say this as theory. For decades, I witnessed students healed not by pleading with God, but by resting in the inner kingdom. The body responded to the peace of consciousness. The form yielded to the truth. Finances. In the world, supply is believed to be external, coming from jobs, markets, people, or circumstances. And so anxiety governs the economic life of nearly every individual. But in the kingdom, supply is understood as consciousness expressing itself. Ideas flow, opportunities appear, guidance emerges, not through striving or manipulation, but through quiet receptivity. When you rest in the truth that divine abundance is the nature of your being, you stop grasping, fearing, and forcing. You become open to the infinite ways in which the universe can provide. Again, this is not magic. It is not the pursuit of wealth. It is the recognition that your good is not dependent on the shifting forms of the world, but arises from the infinite source within your own consciousness. Relationships. How often human relationships suffer because individuals look at one another through the lens of personality, history, and ego. Yet in the kingdom, you see the divine nature of the one before you. You respond not to their fear or their behavior, but to the spiritual reality that stands behind appearances. A quiet compassion replaces judgment. A gentleness replaces defensiveness. A wisdom replaces reaction. And in many cases, the outer relationship transforms not by effort, but by a shift in your consciousness. Understand this. When you see another through the eyes of spirit, something in them responds, even if they do not consciously know why. Harmony unfolds because you are no longer relating to ego but to the presence within them. Everyday challenges, even the most ordinary situations, traffic, schedules, work pressures, become different when consciousness abides in the kingdom. Instead of reacting from tension, you respond from stillness. Instead of being driven by fear, you are guided by intuition. Instead of living from the world's pace, you live from the rhythm of the inner presence. And this inner poise, though invisible, changes everything around you. You see, demonstration is not seeking results. It is witnessing the natural activity of spiritual law. When consciousness rises, life aligns, not because God intervenes, but because truth expresses itself wherever it is recognized. And so, begin to observe your life compassionately, attentively. Notice where fear still governs, where striving still dominates, where the world still appears as cause. Then gently return to the inner kingdom and watch how even a small shift in awareness produces a different response, a different perception, a different outcome. The kingdom expresses itself effortlessly when you live from it. Your task is not to force demonstration, but to remain in recognition and let life unfold from spiritual law rather than material fear. Now, as we speak of living in the kingdom consciousness, it may seem as though once this truth is recognized, all fear, all confusion, all human difficulty should simply fall away. But the spiritual path does not unfold in a straight, uninterrupted ascent. It unfolds in cycles, moments of light and moments of forgetfulness, moments of clarity and moments of obscurity. And if you are unaware of this natural rhythm, you may mistake these fluctuations for failure. But they are not failure. They are part of the purification of consciousness. It is essential, then, to understand the obstacles you will encounter, not so that you may fight them, but so that you may gently recognize them and return to the inner presence. The first obstacle is mental noise, the relentless activity of the human mind. The mind has been conditioned for decades, even generations, to view the world through fear, judgment, and reaction. It is accustomed to solving problems, defending itself, seeking advantage, and avoiding loss. When you attempt to enter stillness, the mind often rebels. It insists, do something, fix something, think harder. It pulls you back into the world of appearances. Do not fight this. Fighting the mind only strengthens it. Instead, observe its activity with compassion, as you would a child who has not yet learned to be still. Let the thoughts pass without granting them authority. Awareness itself dissolves their power. The second obstacle is emotional momentum. When fear, anger, or sadness arise, the tendency is to identify with them, to believe they are your true state. But emotions are simply waves generated by past conditioning. They are not spiritual truth, and they have no law to sustain them. When they arise, acknowledge them gently. This is a passing emotional movement, not the reality of my being. In that recognition, they lose their grip. The third obstacle is expectation, the subtle belief that spiritual practice should quickly produce noticeable results. When nothing dramatic occurs, the mind whispers, "This is not working." But the kingdom is not revealed through spectacle. It is unveiled quietly, steadily, like dawn spreading across the horizon. Expectation binds you to results. Recognition frees you from them. The fourth obstacle is returning to the world for reassurance. You may have a beautiful moment of peace, but soon you check your body to see if it is healed, check your bank account to see if supply has appeared, check a relationship to see if harmony has manifested. In that instant, consciousness slips from spirit back to appearance. Demonstration follows recognition, not inspection. Your task is to remain centered in truth, not to monitor results. The fifth obstacle is self-judgment. This may be the most subtle of all. When you forget your practice, when you react in anger, when you fall into fear, the mind quickly condemns. You see, you are not spiritual enough. You will never awaken. But judgment is never the voice of spirit. Judgment is the echo of the human mind. The kingdom never withdraws from you. You simply become temporarily unaware of it. And the instant you return to recognition, even clumsily, even weakly, the presence meets you there without hesitation. The sixth obstacle is using truth as a technique to fix problems. When you declare spiritual truth in order to change conditions, you are still bound to material consciousness. Truth spoken as a means to an end is not truth. It is manipulation. But truth recognized for its own sake without agenda unfolds as harmony in its own way, in its own time. And finally, the seventh obstacle is discouragement, a subtle sense that progress is too slow, the mind too busy, the world too overwhelming. But remember this: the spiritual path is measured not by dramatic experiences, but by gradual shifts in awareness. You may not see the change day by day, but over months, over years, you realize that fear no longer dominates, that peace returns more quickly, that inner guidance is clearer, that life unfolds with increasing grace. When obstacles appear, do not resist them, do not judge them, do not analyze them. Simply return again and again to the inner kingdom. Every return strengthens awareness. Every return lifts consciousness. Every return dissolves a layer of illusion. The kingdom has never left you. You simply wander from it in thought. And every moment of recognition brings you home again. As you continue in this practice of recognition, sometimes steady, sometimes faltering, something begins to unfold within you, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, like the slow blooming of a flower at dawn. The kingdom of heaven, which at first felt like a fleeting glimpse or a momentary experience, begins to establish itself as the underlying atmosphere of your life. You start to live, not occasionally, but increasingly, from a center of spiritual awareness rather than from the surface fluctuations of the human mind. This transformation, because it is deep and authentic, does not happen overnight. It is not the result of intense effort nor the reward for spiritual performance. It is the natural ripening of consciousness as it turns again and again toward the inner presence, just as a compass turns unfailingly toward the north. At first, the turning must be intentional. Later, it becomes spontaneous. Finally, it becomes inevitable. In the early stages, you may find yourself slipping often into fear, reacting to circumstances, becoming entangled in the world's noise. But with each return to silence, with each moment of recognition, something in you strengthens. The grip of fear loosens. The intensity of reaction diminishes. The world no longer holds the same authority over your peace. Gradually, your consciousness undergoes a profound shift. Instead of seeking God in moments of crisis, you find yourself sensing the presence in the quiet ordinariness of daily life. Instead of praying for solutions, you live from the awareness that the infinite source is already within. Instead of trying to change the outer world, you rest in the realization that spiritual law governs all true activity. You begin to notice subtle changes. A problem that once produced anxiety now evokes stillness, and from that stillness, guidance arises. A relationship that once triggered conflict now awakens compassion, and from that compassion, understanding emerges. A financial concern that once stirred panic now invites receptivity, and from that receptivity, opportunity unfolds. Nothing external has been forced. No one has been persuaded. No circumstances have been manipulated. Rather, consciousness has shifted, and because consciousness is cause, form follows effortlessly. And over time, you discover that this kingdom awareness becomes the quiet foundation beneath every experience. You may still face challenges, health issues, financial pressures, unexpected changes, but they no longer shake your inner equilibrium. You respond from a place deeper than thought, from a presence that is untouched by circumstances. You live with a confidence that is not arrogance, but trust, not in the world, but in the spiritual truth at the core of your being. This is what it means to live permanently in the kingdom, not that you never feel fear, but that fear no longer determines your state. Not that circumstances never become difficult, but that difficulty no longer pulls you out of inner alignment. Not that the world becomes perfect, but that your perception becomes anchored in a deeper reality. Eventually, something even more profound occurs. You begin to recognize this same presence, this same kingdom in others. You see past their behavior, past their fear, past their confusion, and behold the divine essence shining through. And as your inner vision changes, your relationships change, your interactions soften, your compassion deepens. You no longer live as a separate self, navigating a world of separate selves. You live as consciousness recognizing consciousness. And finally, after months and years of practice, the kingdom is no longer something you visit. It becomes your home. You wake in it, walk in it, rest in it. You live from an awareness that God is the substance of your being, the activity of your mind, the life of your life. The world is still the world, but you no longer inhabit it from fear. You inhabit it from spirit. This is the long transformation, not a sudden illumination, but the steady unveiling of what has always been true. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and you are within the kingdom, eternally, inseparably, and without effort. And now, as we bring this time of contemplation to a close, let us return to the simple, luminous truth that has been the foundation of all we have shared. The kingdom of heaven is within you, not as an ideal, not as a metaphor, not as a distant promise, but as an ever-present reality, quiet, steady, unchanging. You do not move toward it. You awaken to it. You do not earn it. You recognize it. You do not call it down from the heavens. You uncover it within your own consciousness. No matter what has happened in your past, no matter what you believe you lack, no matter how often you have forgotten or wandered, the kingdom has never withdrawn from you. It has waited patiently for your attention to turn inward, for the noise of the world to soften, for the heart to become receptive to the truth that has always been true. You need not understand everything at once. You need not achieve perfect stillness. You need not transform your life in a day. Begin with one moment of recognition, one pause, one breath, one quiet turning inward to acknowledge the presence is here. The kingdom is within me. If you practice this simple recognition gently, sincerely, without pressure, you will find that something within you begins to shift. Fear loosens its hold. Peace becomes more accessible. Guidance becomes clearer. Life begins to reflect the harmony of the inner kingdom, not through force, not through willpower, but through the natural activity of spiritual law expressing itself through awakened consciousness. And as days become weeks and weeks become months, you will find that the spiritual light you once glimpsed occasionally becomes the atmosphere of your life. You will walk in a deeper peace, respond with greater wisdom, and live with a quiet assurance that does not depend on outer conditions. You will discover that the kingdom is not a destination you hope to reach, but the home you have always belonged to. So take this step today, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. With whatever understanding you have, with whatever faith you possess, with whatever willingness arises in you at this moment, turn inward, even briefly, and recognize the presence. The kingdom is not waiting to be given to you. It is waiting to be acknowledged by you. And as you continue in this practice faithfully, gently, persistently, you will awaken more and more to the truth that has been shimmering beneath every breath. You live in the kingdom, and the kingdom lives in you. This is the path Joel Goldsmith illuminated. This is the truth the Master revealed. This is the invitation extended to you now. May the awareness of the kingdom rise in you until it becomes the silent foundation of your life, the light of your consciousness, and the peace that accompanies you in all things.